Good morning, everyone. We are about to begin the field trip to our state house. We were supposed to go in person, but unfortunately we can't. And so this is going to be our next best thing. So we're going to take our trip through the use of this video. Virginia Drew is the one that is going to be our guide through the state house. And I'm going to stay with you throughout just to kind of give you some reminders of things that we had talked about in class. So we're going to begin. We're going to start in the Hall of Flags when we enter the building. I believe Ms. Drew is going to give us some history outside as well. All right, so kick back. Here we go. How beautiful that building is. This is where we would walk in when we got off the bus.
So we're standing in the New Hampshire Hall of Flags. This room has been in our State House in use since 1819. Our building first began being built on September 24th, 1816, and our first cornerstone was laid, made out of granite. New Hampshire is the granite state. By 1819, on June 2nd, the State House opened its doors. This room during that time was just called Doric Hall. The only thing in the room were these large wooden columns on granite bases. As time went on, it was a cooling area for legislators to come downstairs. It was a place where people would come and gather and meet when they were coming to the State House for business. Then came the Civil War. 1861, New Hampshire's men answered the call to arms. They left their homes. Many came here to this building. They enlisted. They were given brand new flags and went off to what we hoped would be a short conflict. The flags that are in the cases here are the flags that were brought back by our men. 1865, when the war ended, what was left of our men, what was left of our flags came back here to this building. We have 88 Civil War battle flags inside these cases. The flags have been in these cases for well over 100 years. So every one of these flags probably has an amazing story and history behind it, and there's never enough time to tell the story of each and every flag. But there is a flag that I love to tell the story of because it's so unique. And this flag here, the 13th Regiment flag, actually was a flag that flew over the capital of Richmond, Virginia. The story is that a young man named Richard Forrester took the flag after it was tossed out after the Richmond government decided to secede from the Union. He took the flag, he put it under his cot, and kept it there until the New Hampshire 13th Regiment came marching in to Richmond, Virginia. He took the flag and put it back up the pole, and our men saw that our flag was going up, and so they went and met him. He was a free African American who was working in the Virginia legislature at that time. He left with the New Hampshire 13th Regiment and came back to New England. In fact, he finished out his rest of his life here in New England. The flag that he brought back stayed with the 13th Regiment flags and ultimately ended up in our case. So along with the fact that our men were off to war during the Civil War, New Hampshire's legislature and our government was still going forward at this very dark time. The building had not had any renovations since it opened in 1819. But during the Civil War, our legislature and our governor began discussing enlarging the building, adding a third floor, and putting on some embellishments. So in 1864 began the construction. Most of our men are at war, and here we are dismembering the back of our building to make it larger. The portico that you see today, this beautiful granite portico, was added on during the Civil War. The dome was designed after a special hospital that is in Paris. And that dome was added on during the Civil War, 1864. Part of the reason we made the building a little wider was because we were adding on such a large dome and removing the small silo on top of our building. We are in the members-only anteroom, and it's the best place to enter into our House of Representatives because it allows you to see the full effect of our very large chamber. New Hampshire's House of Representatives has the oldest continuously used legislative chambers in America. And here is the room where the largest state legislature in the United States works and meets. New Hampshire elects 400 state representatives every 2 years.
I just want to show you guys. See, remember when we were talking about and we were creating that no homework bill? And I told you that the House of Representatives, they sit in these seats. And here are the little buttons that they vote for. So yes, no, I'm not sure what the white one is, but it'll all tally up. But this is where they are seated. This is what we were talking about in class.
2 years. And they enter into this room and they sit in what is a unique style of seating for legislators. They sit in stadium seating. They are sitting in the same chairs that they have been sitting in since the 1950s. The seats in this chamber are all assigned seats. We have seat numbers on every seat, though I will point out a bit of a quirk is that there is no seat 13 in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, so no representative has to sit in that traditional bad luck seat. The members will come in, they were here yesterday until near the end of the day, in a room where legislators have been working and meeting since 1819. We have had a few changes in this room, such as we went from candlelight to gasolier, and now today we have electric lights. The light fixtures that you see are the same light fixtures that were put in during the 1910 renovations. New Hampshire's early government wanted to have a house that would be representative of the people. And so they put into the Constitution that there would be representation to represent as many people as possible. Today, we are the best represented people in the nation. Each of our 400 representatives represent approximately 3,400 citizens. We call it a citizen legislature. This is a legislature that is close to the people who they represent. I will point out that these 400 state representatives are volunteers in all essence, because in 1889, we established a salary cap for our legislators. New Hampshire state representatives receive $200 per term. The New Hampshire House of Representatives has 5 wonderful portraits on the walls. The centerpiece is George Washington, and I will confess it is a copy of the Gilbert Stuart painting that hangs in Rhode Island. But we are unique in that we have a portrait of Franklin Pierce. The only president from the great state of New Hampshire is Franklin Pierce, who is to the left of George Washington. Pierce, when he was 26 years old in the 1830s, was New Hampshire's Speaker of the House and went on to be the 14th President of the United States. To the left of Franklin Pierce is Daniel Webster. Daniel Webster was a great statesman. Webster was the defender of the Constitution. New Hampshire has long looked up to Daniel Webster, as so has the rest of the United States. To George Washington's right is the newest painting out of the 5. The portrait of Abraham Lincoln was painted in 1920s. It was a project of school children who felt that Lincoln should have his portrait on the walls of the State House. They did a penny fundraising and raised enough money to have Alexander James paint this wonderful painting. And on the far right is John Parker Hale, one of my favorite men on the walls, and yet many people have never heard of Senator John Parker Hale. He, like Franklin Pierce, served as a Speaker of the House in this chamber. He, like Pierce, was a lawyer. He even ran for president at the same time that Franklin Pierce ran for president. But John Parker Hale ran on a platform that he wanted to end slavery. He was an abolitionist far before it was a popular thing to do. And John Hale has the distinction of being the first U.S. Senator to speak out against slavery. We bring guests from other legislators from all over the world and other states, and very often they will make comparisons to the very austere chamber that you're in, to all of their artwork and flourishes and embellishments on their chambers. Part of the reason this room is so plain is because this is how it's looked for well over 100 years. 200 years ago, it actually had a lot more paintings on the walls, but when we added hallways, we took some of those portraits out. There used to be paintings up along the top of those columns up there. Today, it's a very austere room that suits the New Hampshire values. This is the only state in the United States that does not have an income tax, does not have a sales tax, and we don't like to spend a lot of money on embellishments or things that are not needed for the people. So at this point, we're going to leave the House chamber and take a very short walk to the room next door, which is where our Senate meets. We're probably the only state that our House and our Senate share a wall. It allows for quick messages being brought back and forth between the House and the Senate. And this is the New Hampshire State Senate. It is a huge contrast to the austere and giant size of the New Hampshire House, because this small room seats only 24 state senators. We have elected 24 senators since the 1870s. Originally, there were only 12 senators sitting in this chamber. 1942 was a pivotal moment in the Senate chamber because the 4 beautiful murals that you see behind me were placed on the walls. These murals were painted by Barry Faulkner of Keene, New Hampshire. Each of the murals depicts something important to New Hampshire. The first mural on the far right shows the first graduation at Dartmouth College, New Hampshire's first college. There are Indians in the background because one of the hopes was to educate our Indians in the North Country. And it is to show that New Hampshire values education. The next mural is Daniel Webster. Daniel Webster, as I mentioned, is one of New Hampshire's favorite sons of our state. He was born and raised here. He is shown at about the age of 9 or 10 years old with the Constitution laid out in front of him. And so Webster is a reminder of the importance of our Constitution and an importance of our government, even at a young age. The mural over here highlights New Hampshire's great contribution to the arts and natural science. Barry Faulkner painted himself within the mural. He is the gentleman in the brown suit, looks like the youngest man in the portrait, though it is found later that he was in his 60s, like his friends in the painting. On the far left, with his legs crossed, is Daniel Chester French. Daniel Chester French, one of the greatest sculptors of all time. And Daniel Chester French sculpted the Lincoln Monument in Washington, D.C. Abbott Thayer is the artist seated, and he has birds on his lap, and he is giving a lesson in natural protective color theory, which today we know as camouflage, highlighting New Hampshire's not only contribution to the arts, but to science. And the final mural, there he is. New Hampshire's John Stark is a famous leader during the Revolutionary War, and John Stark wrote the famous motto of New Hampshire: "Live free or die, for death is not the greatest of evils." 1945, sitting at these same tables and chairs, the New Hampshire legislators voted to make that our motto. And today, you see "Live free or die" on our license plates even. So this chamber, like the House chamber, is one of the oldest continuously used legislative chambers in America. And history has been made in this room many times over. But one of the highlights of most recent history was in 2008, when New Hampshire voters elected more women to our Senate than men, making this the first legislative body in America to have a female majority. We couldn't leave this chamber without visiting this historic piece of furniture. This desk is from the 1819 Senate chamber, and it is a historic piece that is used to register our presidential candidates. Every 4 years, we put this desk on a dolly and bring it down to our Secretary of State's office, where the New Hampshire candidates all come forward and sign in. So we're leaving the original part of the State House, and we're now in the 1910 edition. This addition houses our Hall of Governors. All the many portraits you see on the walls are former governors of New Hampshire that we get to look at on our way to our Executive Council chamber and Governor's office this way. So you are entering into our Office of the Governor. This first area is the governor's reception area with the most recent portraits of governors, including the newest one who is so new he has not yet been hung on the walls. 15 years ago, Governor Craig Benson was the governor of New Hampshire. Prior to that, the most recent portrait was our first elected female governor, Jeanne Shaheen. As time goes on and new governors are elected, we add to the walls and we move governors into the Hall of Governors. Behind us here is the New Hampshire Executive Council chamber. This room is where our governor holds his governor and council meetings. New Hampshire's unique form of government is our Executive Council. While, like other states, we elect our legislators and our governor, New Hampshire also elects executive councilors. Each of the 5 councilors represents 1/5 of our state's population, and they have a very important function of a check and balance in the governor's office. The paintings on the walls, many of them show some of the earliest governors of New Hampshire, including royal governors. And back in the day, a royal governor was able to appoint their friends to the judiciary. Their friends would get the contracts to do the work. New Hampshire's Executive Council now takes that away. Our governor nominates the judiciary appointments, but the Executive Council approves. And so our governor can nominate commissioners. He can extend contracts for any item over $25,000. And the council will gather and meet and vote on that. They typically meet every other week, and the meetings are open to the public. We bring in folding chairs for the visitors and the people that want to visit and see what's happening in our government. The wooden chairs along the side are where our commissioners often come and sit. But at this table, this same table since 1910, is where our governor and executive councilors hold their meetings. The governor presides at the head of the table, and our councilors sit in order of where they serve. District 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The additional seat at the table is for our Secretary of State's person who handles all of the agenda and minutes of the meetings. They still do things the old-fashioned way. And so just this week when they came in and met, each of them had a stack of papers so high that they could not see each other across from the table. It's the end of the fiscal year, and so all those contracts that hadn't been attempted to be voted on needed to be voted on. So this is New Hampshire's State House Visitor Center, and this is a room where tourists and guests can come. Legislators will stop in on their way upstairs. But every 4 years, this becomes a very special and unique room. When New Hampshire has its first in the nation presidential primary, all of the candidates who are running for president come to our State House. And years ago, I started a small display of some buttons and bumper stickers to encourage some of the candidates to come into the visitor center. Over the last few elections, all the candidates have been visiting. And this is just a bit and piece of some of those candidates who visited our state capitol, including when Barack Obama visited the building and had his photo taken, and Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, John McCain, Chris Christie, Bernie Sanders, all of the candidates, from those who are extremely well known to those who maybe only a New Hampshire person would know, such as Vermin Supreme with his rubber boot on his head. We embrace the presidential primary. We enjoy the excitement and the unique opportunity to get up close and meet candidates. And so we invite them into this room. Along with our presidential primary display, we like to highlight not only are we the first to vote for president with the first in the nation presidential primary, but we're a state of many firsts. We were the first state to declare our independence from the British. We were the first state to create a state constitution. Upstairs, I mentioned we were the first state to have a female majority in our legislative body in the Senate. But prior to that, we were the first state to have a female in-state leadership majority. And we had a woman speaker, a woman Senate president, and a woman governor. Later, we went on to be the first state to have an all-federal female delegation. And even today, all of New Hampshire's federal delegation are women. So New Hampshire is a state that doesn't have a professional sports team, but what we do have is politics. And we watch our politics, we embrace our politics, from our very large, the largest state legislature, to our presidential process. This is an inclusive government. This is a place where politics is the pastime.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that trip. Clearly, we would have been able to see a little bit more, but they highlighted the most important parts of this building, and those things that we had touched on and we talked about in class, we read about. And I hope that this brings it a little closer to you. I hope you have the opportunity at some point to actually visit this building. I've visited it many times. It's a beautiful place to go. It's very historic. So it would be a great thing to do maybe during the summer. I hope you get a chance to see it. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed our field trip. All right, everyone, get on the bus. Just kidding. Have a good day.